Okay, here we have computer-generated chess problem 00948 by Chesthetica. Now, in this position, material is even, and one of the interesting characteristics is that white has got 3 knights. Another interesting thing about this position is that the rook on h1 is in a position to be captured by the knight on g3. Now, before I explain to you the solution to this problem, let's take a look at what happens, for example, if white makes the obvious move, which is knight captures h1. Now this leads to a draw, because after rook to d7, if knight to c3, then bishop captures c3, and after king captures c3, rook to c7 wins the rook. And if, for example, knight to b4, well, then bishop to c5, discovered check, king to c3, loses to bishop captures b4, and if king captures b4, king captures rook, and after king captures pawn, rook to h7, and black is winning. The correct move in this position is therefore, surprisingly, knight on the h file to f1, and I will now show you why with some analysis. Knight on the h file to f1. What does this do? Now if rook to d7, then we have knight to d2 check, king to a1, king captures d4, and here white is winning. Now if rook captures f1, well then knight captures f1, and if rook to d7, knight to d2 check as before, king to a1, rook to c1 check, king to a2, knight to b4 check, king to b2, and rook to b1 mate. And if rook to b7, well then it's longer, knight to d2 check, king to a1, king captures d4. White now has a large material advantage, a2, king to c3, rook c7 check, knight c4, and mate is inevitable. What if white had played the wrong knight to f1? That means instead of knight on the h file to f1, white played knight on the g file to f1. Well then this seemingly minor difference leads to a draw. So for example, after this, rook to b7, knight to d2, king to a1, king captures d4, rook to b2, knight to e3, and then rook captures h2, king to d3, rook to h3, and it's quite difficult for white to make progress. Rook to c1 check, king to a2, rook to e1. If we go back a few moves, black also has the option of rook captures c2, knight captures c2 check, king to b2, knight captures a3, rook captures a3, and then this is basically a draw as well. It's impossible to checkmate the black king with 2 knights, especially if he has a rook as well. So you can see that the critical move of knight on the h file to f1 is important, because again, after rook to d7, knight to d2, king to a1, and basically black has got 2 pieces, the black bishop on d4 and the rook on h1, in positions to be captured, and white can capture either one of them. So white can play king captures d4 here as well. And if black tries something like rook to h4 check, well then the king comes closer, king to c3, and if rook captures d5, well then knight to b3 check, king to b1, rook to c1 check, king to a2, rook to a1 mate. So it would be very difficult in this position for the typical player to see what the best move to play is. There's also one more thing I would like to show you here. So for example, again, if we look at the possibility of knight captures h1, which would be a temptation for most beginners and intermediate players, after rook to d7, if for example knight to f4, well, then we have b2, discovered check, maybe king to e4, and white loses the rook. And if for example here we have maybe rook to c4, after rook captures d5, if rook captures d4, then the rooks are going to be exchanged, and now this pawn is unstoppable. I hope you like this study. Thanks for watching.